gross. Horrible.
Yeah, no, thank you.
Yeah, it was hot this morning. It was like 70. Welcome to Kidmin Backstage, a place where we talk about kids ministry and take a peek behind the scenes. We try to share a little bit of what we've learned that works for us and some of our failures so you can avoid them. We release a new episode every Friday, and this is your backstage pass to see the magic or disaster that happens behind the scenes of our kids ministry. I'm your host, Gabe Baker, and today I am joined by Brother Matthew Critcher. How's it going?
Good. How about you?
Good. I got to scoot up here.
It's great to be here. Always enjoy it.
Yeah, it's funny. Right before we started, we were talking about the weather, and so it's super, super hot here.
Oh, man.
It's like mid-80s. So for us,
that's our melting point. You know,
yeah,
different elements have their melting point. That's ours.
We start like, oh no.
Oh, that's great.
But okay, well, what are we talking about?
We're going to talk about balancing creativity and accuracy.
Balancing creativity and accuracy. So, in our Sunday school, how we operate, and if anybody listens to this podcast, they hear this over and over. But how we operate is we do kind of like when I'm getting props and stuff or paint and stuff. I tell people what I'm doing. It's like a children's interactive theater. Mm-hmm. It's kind of how I explain it, you know. But I say Sunday school, but it's, you know, it's bigger than maybe what some people are thinking, you know. Mm-hmm. And so every Sunday we act out. We have act out. we act out the Bible stories. But we put on costumes and we have a stage and we have, you know, all these scenes that we do and everything.
Oh yeah.
And so we have this whole interactive theater experience, and we're trying to grab the kids' attention. And that's where there's this balance that needs to happen between the creativity, grabbing the kids' attention, but yet remaining biblically accurate. And we're going to discuss some of this today. I don't think that they're directly opposed. They're not necessarily a dichotomy, but there is certainly a difference of, you think of like sitting down, doing a Bible study with seasoned saints on Melchizedek, you know, or something, versus, you know, the action-packed David and Goliath story, right, that is unfolding on stage. So, all of that to say, like, and I wrote a couple extra notes while I was waiting. We like different characters, you know, that maybe to draw it out, you know, like the Bible doesn't say a lot about, right? We like, I like to study those kind of people. And so when we add dialogue to either characters that the Bible doesn't record their dialogue, or where it's pretty minimal and we kind of embellish it or whatever, we add dialogue to that, or if we think, like I put in the servant girl who's told Naaman to go see Elisha in 1 Kings. Yeah. If we add like what she was thinking, you know, that's a creative. I don't think it's bad, but I'm just saying that's a creative element, and it's not a factual element of accuracy. Yeah. And so there's the balance, though, of, you know, balancing that creativity, because we don't want to just entertain. Mm-hmm. We want them to understand the Bible stories. And like we mentioned the other day when we were talking, that brought this whole podcast on, is I want the kids to know this is different than fairy tales. I think the example I said when we were talking is David and Goliath is not Jack and the Beanstalk. Yeah. Jack and the Beanstalk is a fable. David and Goliath is real. It really happened. Yes. So anyway, that's just kind of what we want to explore today.
Yeah. No. And when we had this conversation the other day, that developed into, it was funny. We were driving to a youth service. Yeah. And Brother Gabe and I were in the front. And I mean, we're just talking about all sorts of things, trying to change the world and all that good stuff.
We need to bring the recording equipment on the road.
I was like, man, this would make a really good podcast. Yeah. And so then when he asked me, I look at the title. I'm like, hey, look at what we're talking about. So, no, kind of how the conversation started somewhat is I brought up how I had that coworker.
Yes.
And, I'll try to insert talking about church and conversations and stuff. And so that was kind of one of these deals. And she brought up one of the Bible movies, that she saw recently. And she was like, yeah, and there was one part that was so moving in that story. And she's like, you remember that in the Bible, how it talks about Thomas and his wife ends up dying and Jesus didn't resurrect her. And Thomas's faith is really low. And he's asking Jesus, what's this all about? And I'm thinking, I've read the Bible through. I've never heard that story.
Don't remember that story.
Oh, interesting. So, I gently, expounded to her, well, that's not actually in the Bible, so they must have added that in. But, this is kind of where this conversation came from is it's good to bring creativity to try to make the story come more alive, but it's dangerous when people then take it as canon of the Scripture.
As fact.
This is actually what the Bible says. We don't want them thinking that a certain character that we made up is actually a character in the Bible. Right. So that's on one side of the spectrum, and so there has to be a balance where we can still be creative about the Bible story. Just we don't want kids to learn something that is not actually biblically accurate.
Yeah, exactly. So. Yeah, and I think our first point is establish some boundaries. Excuse me. So, we have a lot of fun in Sunday school, and it's silly and goofy sometimes, and we'll do things that are certainly we're not in the Bible or whatever. And then I know that sometimes with limited staff, I've heard of, like where you have to have Danielle in the lion's den, because you don't have a guy or whatever. And so at that point, it's like, what's worse, cross-dressing or... So you understand that. But I think the challenge, is like, I think of my 8, he just turned 8. So my 8-year-old son, walking away thinking, just to use that for example, and I'm not saying that's wrong or anything. We've probably done something like that before. In fact, I know we have. But him walking away and thinking that it really was Daniela, or whatever, and so that's the balance,
slippery slope a little bit.
Yeah, I think. Well, yeah, and I think slippery slope might sound a little negative.
It is.
Okay, and so I think that what we do, and I don't know that we're going to solve it today or anything. It's an interesting conversation to have, because I think that most Sunday schools do take liberties, and most Sunday schools have a lot of comedy and stuff, and I think it's fine
too.
Yeah, but I think that one of the keys is to identify core elements in a Bible story and make sure that you don't change that. Like, let's just take one, for example, a popular one is David and Goliath. If we were to take that story and embellish it in such a way that it took away the idea of, the power of God on David, and this is why he won, or, I don't know. It just like, if we understand the essence, and I don't want to jump ahead in the notes, but if we could understand the essence of the story and make sure we don't change that. So like the other thing is, I think it's okay to imagine a Bible character, as long as we, you can't go like over the top. I guess you could take this out of balance too, but I think it's okay to imagine a Bible character that they had certain personalities, I guess, because we don't really know.
That's right. Yeah.
And so as long as we're not taking it out of context, like, they were effeminate or something goofy like that, But like I read a story one time. One time I did a little stint on Paul, the Apostle Paul. And so I read in the Bible, of course, but then I had, we were just talking about this the other night. I had a book collection, and I had to get rid of it. Now I have, like, I don't know, 300 books on my phone, but I had about 300 books or something on a shelf, and I had to get rid of them. Your brother got a lot of them.
He's
but
lucky.
in that, I had a stack of books on Paul, and so I think Beth Moore was one, and they're fictional, kind of fictional, but I mean they were fictional stories, but they were based on the Bible and the Apostle Paul. Wainwright is another one that wrote on Paul. Anyway, I had all these other. I had one by John MacArthur, and it was more about specific. It was about Paul. It was a leadership book, but it was about Paul on the boat when he was prisoner, and they were going to kill all the prisoners. Anyway, I read all these different books, and it was really neat getting kind of a just an overview of Paul and who he was. But one of the books, I don't remember which one, but one of the books presented him way different than I would ever have. And again, I think it was okay, but they presented him as more, I guess, kind of jolly and funny, cracking jokes all the time, and really charismatic, and just funny and outgoing, and laughing and stuff. And so, and I even read some books that talk about that. Like his stature and everything, that they gather these facts from history and think that maybe he was, a smaller man or what. Anyway, so I guess saying all of that it might not be super accurate. Like I imagine Paul is a little bit more stoic, or solemn. I don't know that maybe he wasn't. I don't know, and I don't think it really matters.
Yes.
And so those are some of the liberties I think that we can take.
No, absolutely. And man, speaking about books about Paul, I mean, I probably read one of the same ones you read. I had one on Paul, fictional book as well. But how they presented it was really good in that they identified what was biblically accurate, but then they also identified what was a thought. So that you knew the difference. So for example, it would approach a lot of his child, because it started with his childhood, which the Bible doesn't record it, besides some things Paul mentioned about himself. But it would start there, and it based it upon what it would have been like to be a boy his age, living in the same area, what they would have done, the customs. But they were very clear to make sure that the Bible didn't say this per se, but this could have happened like this, because this is how it typically took place. And so I think if there's a way that if you do decide to be creative in it, I think you should, to make it more interesting for the kids. If there's a way that you can get it to where they know what is biblically accurate, but they can also know what could have been.
Yes.
Versus, just doing it, and then they're thinking, well, and then they're reading the Bible story themselves someday, and they're like, but they taught it in Sunday school like that.
All this time I thought.
And I thought that this was, but if you're able to define those lines somehow, I think that could help maybe with the balance.
Yeah. Well, and that is something else that is maintaining that distinction between facts and quote-unquote parable. And that's what we talked about the other day too, is that Jesus taught in parables. I love that because I love stories, you know. And so Jesus taught in parables, and I've heard the thought that some of those parables may have been true stories, but it's thought that a lot of them are fiction stories. So I don't know. I haven't studied all that out, and somebody smarter than me probably knows. But he used them as an example.
Yeah.
And so in Sunday school, a lot of what we do, so our teaching is not like exegetical in Sunday school, right?
Yeah.
You know, we're not trying to dissect scripture or whatever. It's narrative and topical, pretty much, is what I think most Sunday school does. It's not like expository teaching and all of this. So, when we and something I mentioned, and I'm probably jumping ahead on the notes, but something that I mentioned to you is that I feel like right now, in the last few years in our Sunday school, that we teach more like concept lesson type than we ever have. And I'm not saying it's good or bad, but one of the primary focuses of, to me, a Sunday school, and I talked about cradle to the grave, kind of idea, like, because I happen to be a youth leader as well. And so thinking of, if you take, and I know we talk all the time about with kids that come on the bus, this might be our only chance. This is why we do Plan of Salvation every week. It might be our only chance to, touch those kids. But then you got to remember our kids, the ones that we're discipling every single week that are there because they're in church. So if you map their progress, what I've always kind of envisioned in very broad strokes, of course, is in Sunday school, they're learning all of the Bible stories.
Yes.
And they know the stories inside and out. They, not just David and Goliath, but, they know Shamgar. They know some of these obscure characters. They know these stories. And one thing that does is I've seen it. I've seen it with my kids. I've seen it with other kids. It's awesome when the preacher Sunday night preaches what we just did in Sunday school.
Yes.
But I've seen it where they're like, nobody blasts us, but they're in the pew coloring.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And they're playing whatever. And the preacher mentions something, whether we did it that day or just no story they know. And they perk up like, wait, I know this story.
Yeah.
This is not just noise, I know this. He's talking about something I know about. And so what I have always talked about is, in the Sunday school, establishing, obviously we're going to teach concepts and lessons and everything, but establishing the Bible stories and not have the stories be an afterthought. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Like a lot of times when if you think of topical, and I guess that's what I kind of mean. We do that more now than we ever have.
Yeah.
But if you think of topical, my understanding anyway of topical teaching or preaching is you have a topic that you're going to teach, and then you go and find scriptures and history and whatever to support the topic.
Yeah.
Whereas exegetical is the other way around. You're looking at a scripture and dissecting it, whatever.
Yes.
So rather than it being topical and the Bible story being an afterthought, or that sounds kind of negative, but rather than the Bible story being supporting the topic, it's almost like I like the idea of saying, we at one time we were doing the Bible stories from Genesis. We were doing them chronologically.
Wow.
And so I like the idea of that, of let's capture the Bible story, and there's a lesson in every Bible story, and we can still have a lesson plan, but let's capture all these Bible stories. That's a really long explanation to say that I've always envisioned that, and then they go into youth, and then it starts getting more into the meat of the Word.
Yeah.
But
Absolutely.
now they have this strong foundation of the Bible stories, and so it's just like David did, just like Joshua did.
So
we
good.
can look at
Yeah.
it's a lot.
This is a big subject.
Yes.
And, and I'm kind of bouncing all over the notes here.
Yeah, me too.
But like we're saying, it's a balance. So when you're in Sunday school, you got to have that creativity, though.
Yes.
And so, because otherwise it's going to be boring. And if it's boring, the kids aren't going to care about the story.
Right.
And so if you can make it creative, if you can, demonstrate it in a way that gets their attention, that's important. That's necessary.
Yeah, and I think that sometimes, I think some people struggle with it more because they maybe were taught them in a boring way.
Yeah.
And so, okay, so my kids, my two older ones, they grew up in. I mean, my daughter was in the very first Sunday school that we did this way. When Pastor first changed it, and so, and I got a picture of her somewhere. I think she was like 4 years old or something, but. So they know Sunday school. We used to listen to Your Story Hour.
Oh, yeah.
They know Odyssey, stuff. Not that that's necessarily super biblical, but they grew up in our Sunday school doing all these stories. And I mentioned that like at youth, I mean, they were like 8, 9 years old, and they would be with us because we're the parents. Excuse me. So they'd be with us at youth, and if we were doing Bible quiz or something, the youth would be like, "You're on our team. You're on our team." These little kids.
That's great
because they knew the Bible stories so well. And so I think that to them, I mean, this might be embarrassing to him, but Adrian, I remember he was pretty young, probably 9 or something. I mean, like he could read, but I remember him cuddling with me and wanting to read out of the Bible about David.
That's good.
And he wanted to read about David and his mighty man. And we were reading, I mean, I'm talking King James.
Yeah.
And we would read, and he loved it. He was just eating it up, like, because David was his favorite character. And so we would read about David. We would read about David's mighty man. And I would expound some. Mm-hmm. But, I mean, we were there reading out of the King James version of the Bible. And so... and I think that it helped, though, that he had, in essence, he had seen these stories unfold in Sunday school. Yeah. So when I'm reading these and thous and, King James, it was still unfolding in his mind on stage, and he could see, the valley and David swinging the sling and, whatever. Mm-hmm. So anyway, I just think that there's definitely value. I mean, the Bible is crazy exciting. Oh, the stories, and so we do it a disservice when it's boring.
That's right. So true.
We present it not how it was intended at all.
Yeah. No, absolutely. It's good.
One of the things I wrote, and I just wrote this as a thought. Because I put maybe, but I was thinking about this, and then I was wrestling with it back and forth, so I don't know. But I what I wrote down was maybe when we make creative additions, maybe they shouldn't change plot.
Okay.
And so you think about like the plot of a story. I mean, obviously you don't want to change it to where like, oh, Goliath actually didn't die. You can't do that. But maybe there's something that would be acceptable. But I just thought, well, maybe that's one boundary, that it could be there is maybe we don't change the plot. I don't know. Mm-hmm. I don't know. It's just it's kind of an interesting thought.
One thing that came to my mind on the subject, because I was thinking the same thing. It's like where is that defining line? And I would say with this topic. It's the lines are, and I don't want this to be taken wrong, but they're kind of fluid somewhat. There's not like this is how it needs to be because every Bible story is different. And there's like Shamgar, for instance, which the Bible has like one verse about him.
Yeah, 2 verses. But
two verses, so with that story, the Bible doesn't paint enough picture for us to really have an understanding of what maybe happen.
And that's a good example because that's one of my favorite ones to embellish.
Yes. Yeah. And so, but then there's some stories like Joseph where, I mean, there's so much detail. Mm-hmm. So in that story, you don't really need to, I guess, expound in the creativity as much. I mean, you could present the Bible story creative, but trying to paint a picture, you don't have to do that as much with those ones.
Well, and I'm glad you brought up Shamgar because I remember I did a article for the WPF Together magazine, and it was all about Shamgar. But I remember years and years ago, I did the story of Shamgar in Sunday school. I might have told it, but I did the whole thing like I have done many times since, and there was a young guy that was in a Sunday school staff, and he asked me after. He's like, I went and looked that up because it was such an awesome story. He's like, there's like one verse, and I think there's two in separate places.
Okay. Judges
and Kings, but and so a lot of that information is like almost all of it is embellished. But I did, I extrapolated some from like Josephus and history and stuff. But so it's totally like what could have been. Like I have. His family sends his family into his house, and they're hiding, looking through the blinds. And so that's a good example of. I don't feel like that's bad and that's wrong, and that's one where if my kids walk away saying, "Well, this is what Shamgar was," I don't think that's a bad thing.
Yeah.
And that's. I guess maybe different than the Daniela example.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
And so again, like I said, we're not going to necessarily solve this today, but it's just an interesting.
It is.
And one of the things I put, we're way off our timer, but is create feedback, and we do review, and so creating feedback to kind of, and we could do better on this with our Sunday school, but to see, are the kids getting it?
Yeah.
Do they really understand it? Like I just mentioned this not too long ago in a podcast, but I to my horror, one time, I don't know, a couple years ago or something, somebody was like talking about plan of salvation. They're like, "What's the first step?" And somebody yelled, "Obey all staff." And that's rule number one. That's our rules.
No, put the brakes.
We have 4 rules, and so and so it's like obey all staff. I was like, oh man, we have failed. To wrap it up, hang it up. We're done. We failed as Sunday school teachers, and so. If our kids are walking away, and we failed that drastically. If we can create review, and in fact, I think I might have mentioned this to you the other day about review, is several years ago we changed our review process. In as far as our review in Sunday school, because we used to review quite a bit of stuff, but one of them was a theme, because we have an ongoing story that happens like 16 weeks is 16 chapters. It's an ongoing story, and so. But now what we do is we review 3 things. We review the Bible story, and what today's lesson was, and what today's memory verse. So those 3 things, because that's what we really want kids to walk away with.
Yes,
is those 3 things from today. And so we review those, and then of course, like I said, we do plan of salvation every week. But that's in our review.
Yeah, no, that's important. I've helped on, and I do help with the bus ministry, and something I enjoy doing is when we're taking the kids back home, dropping them off, I'll usually ask them and kind of make it a challenge, like, all right, what was the Bible story today?
Oh, yeah.
And so they would be like, all trying to argue and see who's the one who could say it the loudest kind of thing. And then I'd be like, take it a step further and be like, well, so how'd the story go? What happened in the story? And through that, good. It gets their mind thinking a little bit like, well, let me think, this character here. And
that's good.
And so that's one way that, us as staff could, at least, with the bus kids and stuff.
That would even be a good system.
Yeah.
To, when facilitators or whoever is riding on the bus home,
do like a little prize giveaway or something.
And if they weren't, a lot of times they're not in Sunday school, but them know what today's stuff was, and then they could. Actually, that's good. We should do that. That would be really cool.
Yeah, no, it's fun.
That'd be a great review process.
Yes, yeah. And it's neat though, because kids are going back home and they've got a Bible story that they've learned, and that's something that will, Lord willing, stick with them. And
yes, absolutely. Yeah. Well, before we wrap up here, we're getting close to our time, but I put something that seems kind of obvious. Know the story. And I always, in our little synopsis on a script, I have, the title, what week it is and all that, but the lesson, and then I have the Bible story and then the reference. Started doing that, I don't know, 4 or 5 years ago, the reference of where to find it. because I realized that not everybody not that I'm a scholar by any means, but I'm the one writing the script, so I know the story.
Yeah.
But I realized not everybody knows the story, and so sometimes people will be like, where's that found?
Mm-hmm.
And so now we have the reference. I don't know if everybody uses it, but we have the reference of where you can find the story. And so here's one thing, though, that I think this ties in with what we're talking about as far as the creativity and the balance and the accuracy. If you know the story, like let's take Joseph. We just did Joseph. So I did a Joseph skit at a seminar in California as part of a children's church thing. So then I took that same script and we did it for youth. You were in it. That was awesome. Oh, yeah. So we did it for youth for the we have a formal event that we do, like a formal dinner, and so we did it for youth. It's about a 8-minute script, and so we did that whole story. Well, I had the script, but I know that story so well. And we've done it several times for Sunday school that I barely had to look at the script. Mm-hmm. But that's the idea. Oh, here's a better idea. I reference this. Excuse me, I keep on losing my voice. I referenced this a while back, but long time ago. Remember down in the fellowship hall? I mean, you were in Sunday school back then, probably. But were you ever staff in the fellowship hall?
Yes.
You were?
Yeah.
Okay. So we had Sunday school down there. We, I think it was for filler. I think somebody was long-winded, preacher long-winded or something, or our script was short, or the combination of the two. And so for filler, we were trying to kind of find something to do. Well, that was the school space we shared, kind of like we do now. And so on one of the desks was a little... like a kid's, 10-page or whatever story of Joseph. It was a little kid's story.
Oh, wow.
So I grabbed it, and I show the kids, the cover and the story. Like, you guys like the story of Joseph? And they're like, yeah, So I tell the whole story, and I pretend I'm turning the pages.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
But I went through the whole thing, way more than what the book covers, right? And so I go through the whole thing. I even got some kids to help act it out or whatever. And I was able to embellish the story, make it creative. I had them hanging on every word. The filler was great. The staff loved it because they didn't have to act. They were just sitting there watching. But I just used that as a prop, and I pretended like, oh, and then, I turned the page, and then he went to jail, So, I guess my main thing is if you know the story inside and out, then now you can be creative and embellish it within context. Yes. When you don't know, I mean, we've had it happen where you make mistakes and you say the wrong person or something, you embellish it and it's like, oh, no, that's not actually what happened, and Shamgar picked up his sling and, whatever.
And that's going to be the one thing the kid picks up on.
Yes, exactly.
Shamgar had a sling.
Yeah, and Moses built the ark.
Yeah. No, that's very important, is knowing your Bible. If you're teaching something, you need to know what you're teaching and know it for yourself. And anything. Absolutely. And also, I mean, through teaching, there will be things you will learn that maybe you didn't even notice before. I mean, just a quick example of that is, I'm a drummer in our church, but I would say probably the most I've learned is through teaching. And because you're learning to dissect it. So when you're in Sunday school or bus ministry and you are teaching a story, you're telling a story, it pushes you to learn more. At least it should. And because you want to make sure you are giving the story justice. You're giving the story what it's worthy of.
Well, and when you do a drum fill, I mean, like say back in kind of the beginning of drumming, you might not even think about it.
Yeah.
You're feeling it and you fill it in. And I remember this would happen with Joey. I was a lot more analytical when I played, but it's like, wait, what'd you just do? And like, I don't know. Play the chorus again, and you got to figure out what you just did. But when you're teaching it, you have to break it down. You're like, it's one E, and and so you have to break everything down. So it does make you more knowledgeable. Yes. And I have found that with Bible stories, teaching Bible stories and wanting to make sure. And the thing is you do not have to be a Bible scholar to be a Sunday school teacher at all. You don't have to. You might
not even teach a Bible study. I know that's another subject.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, you might know David and Goliath, and Moses built the ark. It might be the only two stories you know, and one of them is wrong. But if you're going to teach it on Sunday, then look it up and know that story. Know it well.
Yeah, it's good.
And then you can come and embellish and do some of that, because it will. You'll learn a lot. I know I've been so blessed to be doing some teaching to Sunday school teachers over the past just few recent years, and it has made me better.
Yeah.
Which in turn has made our Sunday school better, I feel like, because it makes me look at, like, somebody might see something that stands out about our Sunday school and, like, can you talk about that? And maybe it's one, like, good thing, and then I have to, like, break it down, and we have so many flaws, but to be able to look and say, okay, well, this is how you do this.
Yeah.
And then come back and say, okay, is this really how we do this? Are we doing this like, we're supposed to?
Yeah.
Like I just taught on excellence, and it made me sit back and say, okay, we need to be a little more excellent in our Sunday school.
That's definitely an important part, and it's just like you said, knowing the story, reading up on it. Before you teach it, even if you don't play a big part in the story, if you're just, let's say like we do, very interactive stories, and let's say you are just the guard in one part of the story, still read it. Still know what's going to happen in the story.
If nothing else, it will help you. It doesn't hurt you to read the Bible. So
for sure.
But if you know, it's interesting today. Krista, who's pretty new, she was the servant girl that told Naaman to go see Elisha. So when he was going to dip in the Jordan, Brother Aaron was Naaman, and he was hilarious as Naaman. Talk about embellish. It was good. It was so.
I believe
funny. It. And so he was like saying, "I am not going to go. It's so nasty. It's like got pond scum," and he was just all this stuff. And so it was interesting because I know she knows the Bible pretty good, and so she, just the way she did, she's like, but if he would have told you to do some big, huge thing, just like the Bible story says, but she did it so well because she knows the story. And so she was able to, like, maybe you should just obey. And our lesson was obedience is better than sacrifice. And so she was able to tie it in right there. It was so good.
Well, even taking what you just said there, and I know we're getting close to the end, so I don't mean to prolong this, but when you brought up what Aaron was doing, that's my opinion, that's the balance right there.
Yes.
Is he was staying in context, and in regards, the Bible says he refused. He did not want. He had an attitude about it. He was angry about it.
He did. Aaron had an attitude,
and so there was some things he said, but at that point, you can be a little bit creative about how you present that, and you can still be accurate.
Well, and Brennan was Gehazi, and he comes out. And he was just like disgusted with Naaman. He was just like, and John was Elisha, and he's in the backstage because that's where they were by the back doors, and so the kids are turned around, and he's like, Gehazi, who is it? Off in the back, he's like, it's this disgusting, and so he obviously, again, he was embellishing, but the lepers were disgusting, and they didn't, so
it's true.
Aaron went to touch him. He's like, I'm clean. I'm clean. Stay back from me, you filthy, whatever,
Oh, that's great. Oh, man.
But, so again, like I said in the beginning, we're not saying that we solved it or anything, but it's just something to think about. It's
making it people more aware.
Yeah, just balancing that. Don't take us so far off the rails that we're confusing the kids.
Yeah.
I wrote something really quick. Creativity and biblical accuracy are not opposing forces, but rather complementary tools that can work together.
That's good.
And so if we can, like I mentioned in our conversation the other day, I think we just don't want it to muddy the truth. We want the truth to shine through and the accuracy to shine through. Yeah. And we want to embellish really to gain a greater understanding. That's really the whole point, is to capture the attention so they actually listen to the story and they remember the story and have a better understanding of it, not confuse it, and make it more muddy, confusing. So
that's good.
Okay, recap real fast before we wrap up. So establish some boundaries. Just kind of, if you're a leader or just Sunday school teacher, is just kind of establish some boundaries. Like, okay, there's some things we're not going to do, and we don't have those. I don't know what those are.
I think they come spontaneous.
Yeah, sometimes. And like I said, maybe it deserves some more thought, but maybe the plot thing, maybe it's like, okay, don't change the plot. I don't know. Number 2 is maintain distinction between facts and, quote, parable. And like we mentioned, there's different ones that say it could have happened this way. And I think it's okay to say in Sunday school, and it could have happened this way. But the other thing, I do this all the time with a Bible story. I'll be like, because kids watch TV, they see movies, they do everything out in the world. And so I'm like, this really happened.
Yes.
This was a real truth. This really happened. And like with parables, I'll be like, this is a story Jesus told.
Yes.
And so
it's good.
And then create feedback through review. And I like the idea about the bus thing. That might be something we may have to implement. That's really cool. And then know the story inside and out as much as you can. We are way over time, so I think that's a wrap.
It's a great time.